Welcome back to our Peace Through Strength podcast, brought to you by the American Security Council Foundation. I'm your host, Joy Votrobek, back with our senior analyst, Laurence Sanford.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And special guest, Mr. Lee Boyland. Thank you, Mr. Boyland.
Thank you for having me.
We are going to be discussing today how close is Iran to a nuclear weapon. There's a lot of hype in the media about it being days or even weeks away. We're also going to discuss North Korea's involvement as well as Israel. Mr. Boyland is a former Army officer, engineer, businessman, and author. He has a BS in nuclear engineering from the, North Carolina State University, thank you. U.S. Army officer, Defense Atomic Support Agency, Sandia Base, Albuquerque. Nuclear device testing at the Nevada Test Center, destruction of chemical weapons, ton containers and cluster bombs, GB bomblets, design and manufacture of explosive warheads and anti-armor warheads, an atomic test veteran. So he is well versed on nuclear weapon and is going to talk to us today a little bit about what's going on with Iran. Can you start us out with Iran's nuclear program?
Yes, it has two components. It's the civilian atomic, they call it the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, AEOI. And then the military, the Republican Guard, has the military version. And so in the past, the International Atomic Energy Commission has dealt with the Iran's Atomic Energy Commission and been excluded from anything that had to do with the development of nuclear weapons. And that sort of finally, I think they finally figured it out in the late, around 2015, and then we went into the treaty. But the situation was that Iran was able to develop all types of facilities without any real inspection until around 2014.
And when you say the treaty, you mean the nuclear proliferation treaty, I'm sorry.
Yes, I do. The ones that we pulled out of, that President Trump pulled us out of. It was, what it was a guaranteed, it guaranteed Iran a path to develop a nuclear weapon over a period of time, which to them is not a big important thing. The important thing to Iran is that they want the weapon. They've been working on it since since Ayatollah Khomeini took over Iran after Ayatollah Khamenei. And it's been an ongoing program. They have tremendously developed internal capabilities to manufacture various components. So let's look at the technology that you have to have. The first thing you have to have is a fissile material. That's either uranium or plutonium. Uranium is a naturally occurring element that is mined using standard mining technique. Plutonium, although it does exist in very tiny amounts naturally, to get enough plutonium-239 to make a bomb, you have to have a breeder reactor, or you can extract it from the fuel rods of regular commercial reactors. And this is a long, very involved, and extremely expensive situation. Iran has chosen to go with the uranium-235 isotope, and so has North Korea, so has Pakistan, and I'm not sure about India. But to get this, you have to have a mine. When we developed the Manhattan Project, the ore that we used to extract the U-235 came from Zaire, the Belgian Congo. Iran has 3 working uranium mines, and at one of the mines they have a processing plant to turn the ore after it's been crushed and the uranium extracted using normal mining techniques. They then convert it to what's called yellow cake, which is like a sand material, a yellow sand material. It's very similar in consistency. And this is put in 55-gallon drums and shipped to Isfahan, where they have a plant that converts the yellow cake into uranium hexafluoride. Now we're getting a little bit complicated here, but uranium hexafluoride is a solid material at room temperature. But if you heat it, it becomes a gas, and it's a very corrosive gas, a very dangerous gas to handle. But this is the feedstock that they use for centrifuge. And there's several ways of developing, of extracting 235 from from the uranium ore, yellow cake. And the one the uranium use is a centrifuge.
Can I ask you, the uranium 234, is it 235 that you're talking about?
235.
235, yeah. Okay. Is that pretty readily available to Iran?
No, you have to have a extraction method. When we went into World War II, we looked at centrifuges and discarded them because they were too complicated. And we built this gaseous diffusion plant, which was a huge U-shaped building, actually a horseshoe shape. And if you started at one end of the hall and walked all the way around the horseshoe to the other end, you would have walked 1 mile. And this whole building was filled with one chamber after another where the gas was passed through filters until you got 90% uranium-235 isotope. And I guess we ought to talk a little bit about isotopes at this point.
Where was this facility, Lee? The U-shaped?
It was in Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Oak Ridge, okay.
Yeah, it's been torn down now, finally. It was called the orange juice plant. That's what the workers did. And a good friend of mine's father was the construction manager on the orange juice plant. So I got a lot of stories about what happened in there and how they waded through the mud to get to their trailers that they lived in, and it was quite a story. Going back to the isotope, every atom, as we know, I think the audience will be familiar with that. The nucleus is a proton or a proton and a neutron, and an electron goes around it like the planets go around the sun. And the atomic number is the number of protons. So hydrogen has 1 proton, and it has atomic number 1, so it would be H1. Uranium has 92 protons, so it is uranium 92 is the number. Now, isotopes are changes within the atomic structure within an element. In other words, an element could have several isotopes. I'll use hydrogen because it's very simple. Hydrogen has 1 proton and no neutron. Deuterium has 2 hydrogen, is an isotope of hydrogen. It has a proton and a neutron. And tritium has 1 atom, a proton, 2 neutrons, and so it's tritium-3. And that's sometimes used as a booster, which I'll talk about later. Uranium has, as its mined, has 3 basic isotopes. U-238, which is the major component. 0.7% is U-235, and 0.0055% is uranium-234. There's a couple of other isotopes, but they don't last very long, so I won't discuss it. So what you have to do is you start out with a cylinder of this yellow cake that's been converted to uranium hexafluoride. You heat it, and now you want to extract just the isotope with U-235. So what you're doing is you're trying to separate a gas with an atomic weight of 3 neutrons different. And think about that. That's tiny. The gas is fed into a spinning cylinder. The cylinder spins at thousands of RPM per minute. And the centrifugal force will drive the heavier U-235 atom toward the outer edges of the centrifuge, leaving the 235 and 234 more in the center. You then extract the gas in the center and you feed it into another centrifuge. And after you do this through one cascade, which is about 160 to 180 of these cylinders connected, spinning cylinders. So if you start out at 0.07 and you run through a cascade, you might get to 0.08 on the next go round. So, and then you do 0.09. So you're talking hundreds of thousands of passes through centrifuge to go from 0.7% to 90%. And
Sounds like quite the process.
yeah, it is quite a process.
How long does this kind of process take?
It can take years. It depends on how many of these centrifuges you have and how many you're using them. Iran has two major sites, and that's 1,001 and 3,000 and the other spinning centrifuge. And they've been at this now for a good 7 or 8 years or more. Before we go any further, I want to mention that there are the types of nuclear warheads, because we're talking about Iran's breakout to get a nuclear warhead. You can have the very simple one that we built, called the Little Boy, that we dropped on Hiroshima, is a gun-type weapon. And that is the story of my first novel, which gives you quite a bit of detail on the information, The Rings of Allah. And the Little Boy consisted of a gun barrel, a 3-inch naval gun, shortened to 12 feet. The projectile was made of uranium-235 at 90%, and it had target rings. They were like big washers, big thick washers. And when the projectile entered the hole, it made a solid cylinder, and that gave you what's called a supercritical reaction, otherwise an atomic explosion. So the gun-type weapon is very easy to make. It can be taken apart and transported in pieces and then reassembled. It doesn't take a special team or anything. However, it requires a great deal of uranium, and it is very inefficient compared to the other type, which is implosion. And the way we developed implosion was in the United States, is they started out with hollow cylinders about the size of a grapefruit, hollow steel cylinders. This was for testing purposes. We were developing a way of compressing this cylinder from the hollow cylinder size of a grapefruit to a perfectly round golf ball with explosives. And that took a lot of work to figure out how to do it, but it was finally accomplished. And they developed lenses. They actually took explosive components and they machined them using optical type lathes and grinders, the same things you use to make telescope lens, to shape the explosive so that it fit together. And when you put the hollow cylinder in the center and detonated it at all points around the outside of it, the sphere at the same time, the shock wave uniformly compressed, and it has to reach the shape, the surface of the steel cylinder or the steel ball perfectly so that it compresses it. And when we mastered that, it took a while to do it. It took an awful lot of money to develop the system. But we could turn hollow cylinders into perfectly round golf balls.
About how long ago did we master that?
We did that during the Manhattan Project. It took about 2 years. Iran they have found components at one of their test sites near Tehran, which now has been bowled over and they've built a parking lot on top of it. We found components that indicated they had mastered this process of turning steel cylinders into golf balls. So once you do that, what you have is a hollow cylinder of plutonium or uranium. And when you compress it, it goes from a subcritical, which means it's not reacting, to a supercritical, which gives you a nuclear explosion. And we have indications are that Iran knows how to do this. It requires specialized explosives. And they have a new plant, not new now, it was new when I wrote this book, in Ishram that makes HMX, explosive high melting explosives. And that's what's used to make what we call the explosive lens. And they call them lens because they're ground like an optical piece of glass. The third type of nuclear weapon is an implosion system where what we call boost. And you want to take it from a fission reaction where one fission causes two fissions, and those two cause two more, and it's a chain reaction, expanding chain reaction. You boost it so that you throw into the mix the fusion reaction where the helium, hydrogen atoms fuse to make helium, and that's what a thermonuclear bomb is. So you can actually boost an implosion weapon. Let's say that it's rated at 40 kilotons, and you put a boost in it by making a fusion reaction in part of the reaction, and you take the same size warhead from 40 kilotons to 400 kilotons, a factor of 10. So boosted warheads are very common now. It was a new technology. And of course, the last one is, which is not under consideration here, is a pure hydrogen bomb, a thermonuclear bomb, which I'm not going to go any further on.
So how will we know whether Iran has in fact developed a bomb until they actually explode it? How will we know?
I'm going to save that for a little bit later. But,
Okay.
so Iran wants to be a nuclear power. They have a weapons program. So let's start with the uranium mines. They have 3 uranium mines at Gushan, Yazd, and Sagan. And they have a mill that make yellow cake. They have a hexafluoride plant in Ishfaram. And this is what converts the yellow cake into a uranium hexafluoride. And the Chinese built that plant for them. You can do 20, the last report I had on it would do about 20 tons a year of uranium hexafluoride. The uranium hexafluoride is stored in stainless steel tanks. You've seen the big propane tanks that you have on trucks, the large ones. It's something they think of a stainless steel tank like that. You put the uranium in as a gas, you let it cool, it becomes a solid, and you can store it. So after you pass it through the centrifuges, you let it cool, and you take the cylinder and you put it in a tunnel so nobody can get at it. And you keep doing this, and their stockpile is contained in a series of stainless steel tanks, and they're all underground, so in old mining tunnels or railroad tunnels. And when you want to increase your percentage of uranium, you take them out, you heat them to the gas, and you feed them through the centrifuges. And when you finish that particular process, you let them cool back. And now you have it in stockpile that was started out at 0.7%. Now you have one that's at, let's say, 3%. And then you can go to 5%, then you go to 10, 15. They admitted a couple of years ago they were at 60% with their stockpile of U-235. In the last report, last year, about a year ago, they found a sample in one of these sites that was 83.7% U-235. And actually you can make, that is a fissionable material for a weapon at that level. But taking it to 90, it gives you a much better, will increase the yield. And they're capable of doing it. They probably already have done it. I think we've covered the centrifuges.
Now that would be the little boy process at that point?
That would be the fat man.
The fat man,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And the centrifuges, they have learned how to manufacture their own centrifuge, which is a real accomplishment. I mean, the Iranians are not stupid people. They are very bright. They have very intelligent people. They have well-educated scientists. The problem is they're dedicated to destroying Israel and then the little Satan, and then they destroy the great Satan, which is America. And they're working very hard at doing that. I think we covered this enrichment science pretty good.
Yes.
So the Iranians have the centrifuge sites. They're not on the surface. They buried them 200 feet deep. They have the site at Fordo, which is 20 miles from Qom. They have 300 centrifuges in there, arranged in what they call cascades of 150 to 180 centrifuges. Just one feeds the other in the cascade. At the end, it's at the end of that process. Then they can just continue by hooking the pipe output into the next centrifuge cascade, and you just keep going. And eventually, you will get to you get the uranium-235 that you want. You got a lot of U-238 as a side product, but that can be used for other things, including armor-piercing weapons. It makes a very good armor-piercing weapon. In fact, that's what we use with the discarding Sabo in the M1 tanks. It's a projectile made of U-238, which is I'll give you an idea. If this cup was solid of lead, and then we made it a solid of uranium, it would weigh twice as much as the lead. So it gives you an idea of density. Uranium's very dense, so that's what you want when you're having a kinetic energy penetrator to go through armor. You want dense material. And it has a nice little side effect, the fact that it's pyrophoric, and the impact will ignite the uranium, actually will burn like magnesium. And you have burning chunks of uranium inside the tank, or the armored personnel carrier, or whatever it was you shot, and it makes for a very unpleasant day.
Yes.
So I understand that Iran, it's a complicated method to get all this done.
Right.
But does Iran have uranium just naturally?
Yes.
As a nation?
They have 3 mines that are mining their own uranium. And the other centrifuge site is Natanz. And that's they have about 1,000, last I heard, was 1,000 advanced centrifuges there. And this is buried under, I think they said it was 20 or 30 feet of reinforced concrete roof and 200 feet underground. So it's only one bomb that we have right now outside of a nuclear weapon that could reach down there and destroy either one of these sites. Fordo had a accident in 2017. Nobody's really ever explained what it was. It appears to be possibly was a criticality accident where you actually got a fusion reaction or a fission reaction going. Killed a lot of people, and they closed the site down for a period of time. And they've been very quiet about it, and there's been very little information come out.
Are they back up and running at full speed, or do we know this?
Yeah, it's running, but I think what they may have done is just seal off the area that they had tunneled out where they had the problem and sealed it and buried it, and just dug another one. Because they don't have the EPA, they don't have OSHA,
Right.
they don't have anybody there worrying about air samples, or you just do what you do what you're told and do it quickly. And okay, now we talked about the implosion sphere already, but to make a nuclear implosion bomb, you have to be able to manufacture a very high energy explosive, and you have to be able to have precision detonators. The interesting thing about the detonators on nuclear weapons, at least I don't know about Russia. I'm sorry, I don't know about Iran, what they're using. They might be careless. But a normal detonator, a blasting cap or a detonator, the same thing, has a wire that's surrounded by primary explosives. And when the wire gets hot, electrical current, just like your electric heater, it causes the primary explosives to detonate, which then is enough energy to detonate a secondary explosive, which starts what's called an explosive train, and the detonation goes to the main charge and causes the warhead to detonate. And all this happens in a fraction of a second. It's very dangerous to do that on a nuclear weapon because there's no way to have the explosive train out of line. In your bomb fuse or any other type of fuse, the explosive train is a column of explosives that is interrupted with a piece of steel, so that it's either taken out of line, which is normally the way it is. A section of it just rotates out of line. So if the fuse goes off, nothing happens other than you blow the fuse nose, top of the fuse off the end of the bomb or the warhead, but you don't set it off. Part of the arming procedure, as you launch the weapon, whether you drop it or you fire it, there's a timer that rotates this missing piece back into the proper lineup, so when the detonator is functioned at the end, the whole explosive train goes off and the warhead detonates. While you use centrifugal force using a projectile spinning, or in a bomb, they have actually a propeller that is used to, as the bomb goes through the air, it provides the energy to align your detonators. And there's all different methods, but every weapon that we fire, and anybody else that designs them, has any sense, designs them so that they won't go off too near the person that fires them. And
I'll buy
and
that.
you have what's called a safe arming distance, and that's a timer that after the launch, it takes so many seconds or part of a second for this rotate into position so that it'll work. And diverge a little bit, but one of the interesting photos I saw as a EOD officer was a person, somebody set up a mortar, I think it was an 81 millimeter, it looked like it, underneath a tree, a very large tree. And nobody looked up. And they dropped the round down, and it fired. And the mortar is fired like a shotgun. It propels it out with the explosive charge. And the mortar round went right through a big tree limb about 20 feet over the mortar tube, and it was sticking through the limb. And it didn't go off, and that's why, because the arming cycle had not completed. The primary went off, but nothing happened. If there was no safety feature, it would have killed everybody in the mortar team. And so that's the reason. You can't do that with a nuclear weapon because you don't have spin. It'd be very difficult to, because the detonators are all the way around on the surface of a weapon. If you think of the old soccer ball with where you could see the patterns on the outside, now those would be your explosive lens going inward. And you have to have a detonator in the center of each one of these, so there's no way you can spin it and arm all the fuses. There's no way. Timer's the same thing. So what was used was called an exploding bridge wire detonator. And that is, if you've ever taken I'm sure just about everybody I know has at some point in time had a short with a wire and had a copper wire pop in their face. Well, think of a large wire about the size of my little finger, and you put enough voltage on it to make it explode. And that has the same power as the primary explosive. So you have to have a large capacitor bank to store the energy so that when you want to fire the nuclear weapon, that all the electricity has to reach all of these exploding bridge wires at exactly the same time in microseconds. And they explode, and that starts the uniform implosion from all directions at one time. Well, it takes a while to figure out how to get the timing. It's very difficult to get the timing of a large number of detonators to go off at exactly the same time. And parts of it, you have very little leeway in the timing, or you will have a off-center detonation wave, and it will severely reduce the yield of the warhead, or maybe even cancel it.
Do you believe that Iran has got
Yeah,
the timing down?
Yeah, Iran has to master that, and I'm sure they have. They've got a plant that was built in Isfahan that makes the high-energy explosives that you need for the lens. So they've got everything, as far as I can tell, they've got everything they need to make a nuclear weapon, and they've had it for some time. But if you want to have being a nuclear power, especially if you're planning on using it, you better have more than one or two, because if you've only got one or two and you use them, the people you use them on are going to be very unhappy with you, and they're going to use theirs on you. Comments were made on the Manhattan Project that the military was very hesitant to even think about using it until they were assured there was more than two. So we cannot, it would be very, very bad for the United States to go into and then have everybody find out, well, we only had two of them and we used them. So you had to have the ability to manufacture warheads, and we did, and we were turning them out. Very shortly thereafter, we had a stockpile of warheads, and we were in the position where nobody else even knew how to make them. Russia was close, but it still took them from 1945 to 1949 when Russia detonated their first nuclear device, and it was a copy of ours that we tested at Alamogordo. They called it the Gadget. That was the name. The Gadget, when it was put in a bombshell, became the Fat Man. And it's much easier to develop something when you know the other guy's got it, and then you can steal his plans.
Yeah.
We had to develop something that we didn't know would work, and we didn't know it would work until they tested it at Alamogordo.
Yeah. Because the Rosenbergs and a few other people passed on
Yeah.
the methods for making the bomb.
Yep, they did. So we were talking about North Korea.
Yes.
North Korea, we now know, has nuclear weapons. They've been testing them now. They have a test site, and there are 6. There was reports earlier I've seen, and I'm sure you did through the intelligence groups, that the Iranian scientists were at the test site in North Korea when they were testing.
Yes.
More than once, more than one test. The last test was, I think it was September 3rd, 2017. And dear leader, or a great leader, I think he's great leader this year, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Oh, I usually think of him as the dear leader. Or is that his father? I'm not sure.
It was 3 leaders. I forgot. I'm lost too on which one he is. But the leader was bragging that he was going to fire a thermonuclear weapon. It was very interesting because Russia said the same thing in 1951, or Stalin did rather. It was the Soviet Union then. They announced that they were testing a thermonuclear weapon in 1951. They did not. They tested a boosted warhead. That was the first indication that they had, that we knew, first indication we knew that they had figured out how to make a boosted warhead. North Korea, I think, did the same thing because the test was done on September 3rd, 2017. You had a 6.3 magnitude earthquake right afterwards, and it collapsed the test site. The tunnels collapsed, and they haven't reopened it. I think it just got literally just totally collapsed inward. I laughed at the thought of it was a thermonuclear weapon because thermonuclear weapons start in the 1 megaton range and go up. 1 million tons of TNT, not 200,000 kiloton. I believe that they fired a boosted weapon based on the Soviet design. That's why I was talking about it, that they used for their first ones. And it was very interesting. They made a pit, and that's the first time I've used the term. The ball of uranium or plutonium that's used in an implosion weapon to squeeze down to make a supercritical mass was called a pit, and we still use that terminology. And some interesting terminology in the nuclear physics comes from scientists with sense of humor. Somebody was looking at the cross-section design of a nuclear warhead, showing all the details, and they had this pit in the middle, and one of the scientists said, gee, that looks like a peach pit in a peach. And the name stuck. It's been called a pit ever since.
Who knew that scientists had a sense of humor?
Yeah, well, they measure the cross-section of an atom in barns, as big as a barn door. There's another one, it was some interesting stories that went on. These guys weren't all, nerds.
Nerds.
I think what happened with the North Korean test is that they did manage to get a boosted warhead, probably around 400 kilotons, and it collapsed the mountain. If they had fired a true thermonuclear device, there would have been a hole in the ground where the mountain used to be. That's the difference.
Okay.
So you believe the North Koreans have been helping Iran?
They've been helping each other on missiles. The Iranian missiles are very similar to the North Korean missiles. They exchanged technology. Iran was paying North Korea in oil. They've been scratching each other's back for some time. They have similar desires. That's to destroy America. We're not the great Satan to North Korea, but it's the same thing. So I think the situation is that I believe Iran has been testing weapons with North Korea and exchanging design. That's my personal opinion. And if so, then they are a nuclear power. They just haven't demonstrated it. Israel's in the same boat. We know they've got nuclear weapons. We know they know how to make them. Israel has never conducted a test to show that they have one, but nobody doubts it. And I think Iran is probably there. And I think Iran is at the point where, not that they can build one or two, which they've been able to do for some time. I would say that they've had a crude nuclear weapon, probably a gun-type weapon for the last 10, maybe 12 years. But they haven't used it because of the same thing. If you use it and you don't have any more, you're in deep trouble, really bad trouble. So they are now at the breakout is being able to not just produce U-235, it is to be able to produce actual weapons. Now, can they deliver a nuclear warhead? It's one thing to build one on a test tower and detonate it, or in a tunnel. It's something entirely different to deliver it on an enemy source when they are employing countermeasures to keep you from doing so. And the question is, can they do that? And we don't know. We really don't know. North Korea says they can do it.
So is
I don't know
Israel-
whether to believe them or not, but they certainly know how to make them. And the model that Kim was showing off would fit in a small implosion warhead. So it's possible. But then the next question is, okay, you can deliver them, but how far can you deliver them? What's the range? 100 miles, 1,000 miles, 5,000 miles? They don't have bombers. They don't have any. They have some old fighter aircraft that could carry a crude bomb. So Iran, I'm afraid that when Iran really strikes, they're going to do something like the story I wrote in this first book, The Rings of Allah, and the second book, The Rings of Allah and Behold an Ashen Horse, where they smuggle the weapons in and detonate them in
They
the
could put
cities.
them on a container ship, or they could put them on a ship that's in the harbor.
You put it in a shipping container, put enough shielding around it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't find it. There's so many ways to bring it in, and I used one storyline in here on how they imported their gun-type devices in, the terrorist. But yeah, I think the situation is that we're at the point where very close where I think Iran will be the one to use a nuclear weapon first. I don't think North Korea will. I mean, Kim seems to be smarter than his father, the new one.
He doesn't have the religion that the Muslims have.
Yeah, I think he has a lot more sense. He's not going to. He doesn't want to die, and the whole basis of mutually assured destruction or MAD that we've been with the Soviet Union ever since they tested their first weapon means that the person who starts the nuclear war gets to live 30 minutes longer than the other side, because the other side is going to fire before his weapons get there, and everybody dies. So you can be dictator of the world for 30 minutes, or you can not be. And nobody has volunteered to be 30-minute dictator. I'm not sure about some of the Muslims. I'm really not. And some of these, what we call jihadists or radical, I think they're fundamentalist, probably a better term. If you believe that you're going to go directly to paradise with no stops, if you die doing your God's work, then you have no fear and you don't care. And you can say, well, yeah, but I'm going to kill all the people in my city too. Well, they were doing God's work, they just didn't know it.
That's scary, really.
Yeah. This is an attitude that there's no compromise with. There's nothing you're going to do to talk people out of this kind of a thought process. And that's why I think Iran having the bomb is extremely dangerous.
And Iran is, as we know, very close to Israel. So let me ask you, so do you think Israel's weapons could destroy Iran's underground centrifuges?
Yeah, the real question is, can Israel destroy the underground centrifuges? No, they do not have the capability except with a nuclear weapon. Can we do it? Yes. We developed what they call a massive ordnance penetrator, MOB, a GBU, I think it's 57, bomb that will penetrate over 200 feet into the ground and detonate over 5,000 pounds of high explosive. And that will mess up a centrifuge. The question is, will we, if we see the need, if it looks like somebody has to do something, will our current administration authorized the use of a GBU-57 on Iranian's underground nuclear. It's not just the 2 centrifuge sites. You're going to want to get the storage site where they have the stockpile of the U-235. Well, if it's not, well, the question is, okay, Israel can't do it. Will we do it? We can, but will we? So assume we won't. Then will Israel use one of their nuclear weapons to try to take out the Iranian sites? Nobody knows. If nobody does this, I think Iran will use a nuclear weapon. I think they'll be the first country to do so since World War II. Pakistan has not. I worried about Pakistan when they first demonstrated their ability to have a nuclear weapon, but sanity has provided or prevailed over there, and I'm not sure I see any sanity in Iran.
So what should the United States policy be?
I think we should take out their sites. I really do. I just think for the good of the world. And there's going to be a lot of people get upset because they don't believe that this will ever happen. You know, they don't believe they'll get mugged until they find themselves lying on the ground with a lump on their head. And that's happened in Washington, D.C. to a couple of senators or congressmen. And they just could not understand the problem until it was demonstrated. And I don't want to see a nuclear demonstration on anybody.
Several years ago, the Israelis and the U.S. Planted a computer code into the nuclear space of Iran and slowed down their program. Can't we just do that kind of sneaky gray, I like to call it gray zone activity against Iran without a kinetic?
Yeah, we could try that. I'd like to see us try it. What they did is they messed up the controls. I think they at the centrifuges got a control. They burned up and burned their centrifuges up. But yeah, I think we should be doing that, but we're not.
Oh,
See, that's the problem. We're not.
What about Israel?
Israel has made some attempts, but right now Israel is locked into a fight for their survival. These people, Hamas, invaded. It was an invasion. There's no other way. They invaded. They killed people for no reason. The worst part is that it wasn't just killing, outright killing. It was torture, and some of the reports, babies being put in ovens and alive and baked, and yet we have people out demonstrating that want to support these people.
Yes, we talk about that all the time.
yeah.
I think they should be sent over there. But
And Hamas, of course, is just another proxy of Iran. Then there's there's Hamas, there's Hezbollah,
and Hezbollah, and all the rest of them.
Yeah.
And Larry and I spoke offline that Iran has now directly come against Israel with drones and weapons. And Israel was successful, but if they continued more and more, to what point are they successful?
When they launched directly, it was an act of war, and Israel was fully entitled to eliminate Iran, and they could have. They didn't, but they're going to get pushed to the point where they're going to have to if this continues, and that's what worries me.
And that's when you think they might consider a nuclear attack?
You don't know what they're going to do. The Iranians are. We got their head of their Republican Guard. Trump did, and that slowed them down. They were developing. He had developed an explosive munition that was killing a lot of Americans, and they were producing it. And I don't know. I think you have to make a strong impression. Look at Korea. You go back to the Korean War. When Eisenhower took over from Truman, I've read indications that he told the Chinese, sign a peace treaty or stop the combat, or I'm going to use nuclear weapons on you.
Yeah, I've read the same thing.
And he had moved a couple over to Okinawa. They were getting ready. And Chinese took him very seriously. I mean, here's a man that won the war in Europe, the commanding general. He says, "I'm going to do this." You bet he's going to do it. You don't have to have any second thoughts about it. And that's the thing. If the enemy believes you, then you do it. But if they think you're just bluffing or talking to hear yourself talk, then they're going to continue doing what they're doing till you reach a point where there isn't any easy way out.
You mentioned the Chinese were involved in the Iranian nuclear program earlier in your talk, Lee. To what extent are the Chinese participating?
Well, they built the hexafluoride plant. They built a pilot plant, and then they built the full-scale model that converts the yellow cake into hexafluoride. I don't know of anything else they've been directly involved in. Russia has built 2 nuclear reactors and taught them how to do a breeder reactor. And Russia's been very active with Iran for the past 20 years or more.
Yeah. And Iran is reciprocating now by sending drones, which they manufacture, to Russia to be used in the Ukrainian war.
Yep, and they're getting paid for them.
In oil,
Yeah.
and cash, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
They don't need oil. So the U.S. government eased the restrictions on the oil exports of Iran, and so they ended up with a gusher of money that they didn't have before.
And a plane load of
Cash.
And then another $10 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah, Iran's doing all right with us, right, with the Biden administration. They're doing very well.
So you probably don't see this current administration as taking out any.
I don't see them. I think they should, but I don't think they will. I can't see Biden authorizing a strike with the GBU-57s on their centrifuge sites.
Yeah, I'm not so sure many Americans would agree for us initiating the thing. I'm a firm believer that the gray zone, you can do a lot of stuff in the gray zone where you don't have to show the flag.
Well, the only way you can deliver that GBU bomb I'm talking about is either with a B-1B or a B-2. No, it's the B-2 or the B-21, the New Spirit. The only 2 that are equipped to drop the bomb. And you drop that from a very high altitude, so that it picks up. You want kinetic energy to help it drive into the ground. It's got to be going very fast when it hits the ground to penetrate 200 feet. And it's a big, and that's the only plane you can do it right now. The B-52s could carry it, but they're too slow, too easy to shoot down.
But is there alternative ways, as we were saying, to take out the centrifuges, like the cyber warfare? Is that possible?
It's been tried. I think Iran has learned a lesson, and it's very difficult to get another one in there. I think they've totally isolated their system from the outside, and the only way you could do it would be to get in there and plant one in one of their computers.
My thinking is the only way to change the situation without war is to encourage native Iranians, and within Iran there's a lot of internal dissension. Remember, there was a woman who was killed by the police because she wasn't wearing her hijab correctly. And then you have the minorities. This is something that a lot of people don't focus on, but Persians represent roughly 65% of the population in Iran. So they have other significant minorities, such as the Kurds, the Balzaks, and there's a bunch of Arabs. So there's a bunch of people who are not very happy, Azerbaijanians, who are not very happy living under Persian rule. So there's a fertile field, in my opinion, of conducting gray zone activities to create unrest within Iran so that the mullahs are gone. And I think Iran is considered to be the most un-Islamic country of the Muslim world, because the Iranians have pretty much gone through the motions of being Muslims, but after seeing the mullahs in action, they decided this is not the way we want to be. So I think there's a fertile opportunity
There was an uprising a couple of years ago. I don't remember the details, but that was an opportunity for us to have gotten into it and back that uprising, and we didn't.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to, just like in China, I think we should do the same thing. We should be encouraging dissension within China, and all our government talks about is they want stability in the region. I'd like to see a little more unrest internally in both places.
Yes, I agree.
Oh.
And I would like, other methods, I'm sure other methods are being applied, and Israel is very, I think per capita, for a country, I think Israel has more patents per year than any other country.
Yeah, just only 10 million people
I
living
know,
there.
and
It's
they still
amazing.
have more patents per year than anybody else. And the ones I've run into are very bright.
Very bright, yes, very intelligent.
So,
Well, thank you, Mr. Boylan, for sharing your thoughts.
I appreciate you having me on. It's been very interesting.
And your latest book is?
My latest book, I've written, the story started with this book, The Rings of Allah, and it went through Behold an Ashen Horse and America Reborn. And there was still a lot of story, but it switched, the focus of it switched over toward the cartels in South America and the revolutions that were going on, and away from Islam. So it was, the next two books were dealing with the cartel problem, pirates and cartels and a triple threat, and that was the what they call the triple area in South America, where Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina come together, and there's a little point of land that sticks up, and it's about 1,000 square miles total, and it's full of drug manufacturing plants and jihadi camps. And Osama bin Laden was over there, and he actually started the jihad movement in the area and made deals with the cartels, and it's still going on today. And it's a hotbed. It's an area. So that was the focus of the fifth book. Triple Threat was the triple frontier. And the last one is Deep State Sedition. And interestingly enough, Amazon doesn't mind printing it and selling it, but they don't want me to advertise, because Deep State is a bad word, and it's I guess DEI unapproved. They cancel my ads on it. But it's on there. They print them and sell them. There's no problem. But they don't want to advertise. Okay. It's their site. I don't argue with them. I appreciate what I get out of it.
yeah.
But
Well, you heard we can find your books on Amazon. Is there anywhere else we can find your books?
Yes. LeeBoylanBooks.com is my website. It describes each book, and there's a link to Amazon where you can purchase them. And they're available as Kindle and print and a paperback.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Larry,
Thank
for
you.
your thoughtful insights.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, please share, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube and Rumble channels by typing in American Security Council Foundation. You can also go on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Please consider becoming a member of American Security Council Foundation for $100 a year. That's less than $10 a month. It includes a paid Substack subscription with Larry's articles on it, as well as Alan Dell, and some of our podcasts are up and coming. So join us again next time for our Peace Through Strength podcast. Thank you.